Hey, I'm Nate with Christ Church Montevideo, and we've been following the professor who wrote Ecclesiastes on his experimental journey on the different paths of life to see if fulfillment could be found under the sun. In other words, here in this life on this earth, if this is all there is. And King Solomon, who's likely the author, had the resources and power to try more pleasure, more wisdom, and more achievement than anyone. And yet he's found so far that nothing was gained under the sun. He's found that what's gained is temporary. It's a vapor that doesn't last very long. So to try to find fulfillment in any of these paths is like chasing after the wind, he says. So he was expecting and hoping that being joyful and wise and hardworking would earn some sort of satisfying reward that would make it all worth it. Or at least make life better than for someone that doesn't even try. That would be the fair thing. Because being negative and foolish and lazy is easier. So what do I gain from all of my effort? So really the question of fairness and justice of life is intertwined in all of these first three experiments and throughout the book. So the final path to try is the justice or morality path. And once again, King Solomon was able to try the highest reaches of this path to see if eventually it would satisfy. In fact, a closer look at the major events of Solomon's life reveals that justice is really at the center of it all. Because in that famous moment when he asked God to give him wisdom, he actually specifically said, "Give me discernment to distinguish between right and wrong, discernment in administering justice." And when he constructed his great palace, he made sure to specifically design what he called the Hall of Justice. Sounds like something from a superhero cartoon, but it was where he would judge. And when his fame drew the Queen of Sheba to visit him, she said, "Wow, God has truly made you king to maintain justice and righteousness." The text says that Solomon walked in the ways of God. He was so good that he had two very positive encounters with the holy God himself. He was so good that he was given the honor of building the holy temple for God. And he gave this eloquent prayer to consecrate it on its opening day. But then in 1 Kings 11, something changed. Solomon seems to have quit trying to be morally good, and he starts going in the opposite direction. What happened? Well, as we see in Ecclesiastes, as Solomon got older, he started to observe the world around him and think critically about justice and morality. It's possible that he lost his motivation to be a man of goodness, because when he looked for fulfillment and satisfaction via this justice and morality path, maybe with the highest of hopes, he found these tragic and frustrating realities. So when it comes to human justice, he found that injustice is the norm. Injustice is the norm, to be expected. He said, if you see justice and rights denied in this world, don't be surprised. And he also found that human justice is corrupt and power is on the side of the oppressor. He said, I looked and saw the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they had no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors. And I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment and justice, wickedness was there. Now, I want you to think back to your childhood. Did you ever get in trouble for something you didn't do? Maybe your parents found something broken and asked, who did this? Naturally, the kid that did it insists that it wasn't him. He may have even accused you. Now you can plead your case, but now it's just your word against his. Now sometimes what happened was that the parent would say, you know what, since no one's admitting to it, I'm going to punish both of you. Or they might just believe the lying kid and punish just you. And what you scream next is something you never have to teach a kid, like saying no or mine. You say, "That's not fair." No one had to teach you that that wasn't fair. You knew that it wasn't, and there was something wrong about that. Sometimes the parent would utter this classic response: "Well, life's not fair." Life's not fair. From a very young age, we learn that life's not fair, and yet, curiously, we've always felt deep down in our bones that it should be. And it seems as we grow up, the injustice and the unfairness of life just seems to increase. And now it's not who pushed someone down on the playground or who stole your toy. There are some really painful injustices in our world today. For example, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, led by the dictator Pol Pot, was the communist regime that committed genocide against their own people, torturing and killing upwards of 2 million in the 70s. And they turned this high school into a torture prison, and now it's a museum dedicated to telling the story. Now, I've actually been through this museum 3 times, and I remember the first time I walked through, my sadness turning to a burning anger. I couldn't wait for the part of the story when someone swooped in to save the day and prosecute these people who had done this. But what you find is something that frustrates me to no end. For unclear reasons, the trials only began hearing testimony in 2007, 30 years after the fall of the regime. By that time, the dictator, the leader, Pol Pot, had died of natural causes after living a comfortable life. His brother-in-law, who was the mastermind of the torture and the mass murder, he was given a royal pardon and was allowed to travel around on a diplomatic passport. He had a homestead out in the country and a luxurious apartment in the city. The number 3 in command, he also died of natural causes after living a comfortable life. And the sister-in-law of Pol Pot was mysteriously and suspiciously declared unfit to stand trial. So as far as I know, only 3 people in the entire regime have ever been convicted, and it looks like the trials have ended. So where's the justice for the oppressed? Behind the scenes corruption. Power is on the side of the oppressors. And this isn't just on the huge genocide scale. We see this all the time. We all know people who have cheated the system. People who have taken advantage of others, who've treated people like trash, but it doesn't seem like they get what they deserve. So clearly, human justice did not satisfy Solomon. It didn't give a lot of incentive to be good. But what about natural justice? The things that just happen, like getting hit by a hurricane or winning the lottery. Does the universe reward the good and punish the bad? Is there good karma for the nice and honest people and bad karma for those who lie and steal? Well, sometimes, actually, people do seem to reap the natural consequences of their actions, but Ecclesiastes finds that so often bad things happen to good people and good things happen to the bad people. He said, I've seen both of these in my life, this pointless life of mine. The righteous dying in their righteousness and the wicked living long in their wickedness. It seems like the righteous get what the wicked deserve and the wicked get what the righteous deserve. He also found that whether you're a good person or a bad person, honestly, both lives can go either way. Time and chance happen to them all, he said. And both lives have the same destiny. They end. He said they all have the same destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean, the unclean, the religious and the non-religious. It's the same with the good and the sinful. This is the evil of how things work on this earth, that the same destiny, the grave, overtakes all. So Solomon asks, if this is all there is, what's the point? What's the point of being fair and good, joyful, wise, hardworking, if it doesn't necessarily make things better for us? And if this is all there is, what difference does it make when I'm gone if I was good or bad? Now, if you're thinking, well, when you die, your deeds live on. I want to leave the world a better place, leave a positive mark, be remembered well. Sure, but for how long? Solomon reasoned that after a certain point, no one's really going to remember you. Your love or your hate will have long since vanished. Because we have to remember that however long human life is on this planet, it's just a vapor. It's an eye blink. Because whatever you believe about the world's origin or its end, this little window of time where life is happening on Earth is a microscopic speck compared to the infinite expanse of dead time before and after. And everyone agrees that at some point the universe is going to burn up. So at the end, how you lived and what you did in these few years makes no difference at all. If you tried to be good or you didn't try at all, it's the same. It doesn't matter. But if there is more than this, then what we do and how we live makes an eternal difference. Because as we've been seeing in these last few weeks, we have these deep, strong longings for things like true love and true justice and inner peace. But maybe our strongest need is for true justice, something that nothing in this world can satisfy completely. See, Ecclesiastes reminds us that there has to be more than this. This can't be all there is. Remember our key verse. God has put eternity in the human heart. He's given us these longings for things that this life can't offer in order to entice us toward the real thing. So first, even with its limited understanding of the future, Ecclesiastes declares that God will bring true and impartial justice, that thing that we long for. He says, not just anything goes. All will have to answer to God, including for every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. There is more than this. And the perfect God will be the ultimate judge who will set all things right. And that sounds great. That satisfies. But who are the good people and the bad people, really? Because most average people like you and me would consider ourselves overall pretty good people, especially if you think about all the evil people in the world. But I bet if you asked a Hitler, Pablo Escobar, Pol Pot, the same question, they'd tell you the same thing. They thought they were overall pretty good people too. But there's this story of a girl in Switzerland who looked out her bedroom window at a flock of sheep on the green grass. And she said, wow, look how white they are. But that night it snowed. So the next day she looked out at that same flock against the white snow and said, wow, look how dirty they are. See, we might look pretty good compared to the evil people that we can think of, but compared to the perfection of God, we don't stand a chance. And he calls disobeying his goodness sin, and this is what he says. In Ecclesiastes, it says, there is no truly good person, not even one that's pure and without sin. And the New Testament agrees in multiple places. For example, in Romans 3, it says, there is no totally good person on earth, not even one. For all have sinned and fall short of God's standard of perfection and the glory that that brings. So the classic question is, as good as we think we've done in this life, when we're in that hall of justice, not Solomon's, not Superman's, God's, will we be declared innocent or guilty based on that criteria? Because what thinkers struggle to fit into a world where there's nothing else, the Bible makes clear. The reason we have this inherent impulse toward true justice, to define right and wrong, that it breaks us up inside to see oppression, is because God is that way. God feels the same way, and he made us like him. And the world has suffering and injustice because he gives us the freedom to follow him or not, knowing that following him is for our good. And the first humans rejected that and brought suffering and injustice to the world. And since then, we just keep piling on to that rebellion against God. Ecclesiastes says that God made us true and upright. We're the ones who've made a real mess of things. So, since justice is at the very core of who God is, he has to bring it. And all humans are guilty without hope of deliverance, because you can't bribe God with good stuff. Even if you were as good and just as Solomon, it wouldn't work. Because if someone's standing trial for a crime and they say, but wait, I've also done all these really good things, that doesn't take away from the fact that they're guilty of that crime. But the amazing thing is that God put on human flesh to suffer and be oppressed. The death of Jesus satisfied the justice of God for us. So he stood up in that hall of justice where we are declared guilty. And he offers himself, he volunteers to take the penalty so that he can put an end to injustice without putting an end to us. He wants all people to experience this life that fulfills, because he's promised, remember, to renew this earth and bring heaven down here so he can erase completely the suffering and the tears and the sadness. So finally, the other half of that key verse is that God has made everything beautiful in its time. So even though it's imperfect because of sin's effects, we can enjoy a certain level of justice in our human systems. And clearly, there are natural rewards and consequences built in to this life, right? So we can be thankful for that, recognizing that that's not the ultimate thing. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to point us toward the real thing. And meanwhile, while we're here, the God of justice desires for us to do good and seek justice where it isn't, to alleviate suffering where we can, to give people a glimpse of that coming kingdom. For that reason, followers of Christ have historically led the world in building hospitals and schools in under-resourced nations and standing up for the enslaved and the trafficked and running out to help and aid when natural disasters strike. Because we have a reason to, because of what Jesus has done and what he will do. So, what's some small way this week that you can give a glimpse to someone you know of that perfect justice and goodness to come? Have a great week.